Okay, tonight is Genesis chapter 4.
And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground.
Especially in the Old Testament, when they use the term someone knew their wife, it means they had sex, all right? That's what it means, okay? So it says Adam and Eve, they got together, and they did what makes babies, all right? And so the result was, it says that she conceived, and she bears Cain, and said, okay, I've gotten a man from the Lord. And you realize this was the first birth, okay? The first birth, because Adam and Eve were created by God, and so now this was their first child, and so that's probably different, right? And also, if you remember, one of the punishments, if you will, when they were evicted from the Garden of Eden was that childbearing would be in pain. So this was the first painful experience of childbirth, all right? But yet they're still rejoicing that they have a son. Okay, and so much so that they did it again in verse 2, right? It says she again bare his brother Abel. Okay, and then it just points out that the two had different likes or different callings in life, right? It says that Abel was a keeper of the sheep or shepherd, and Cain was like a farmer, a tiller of the ground, right? So, just like as you find today, if you have, just because you have multiple children in the same family doesn't mean they all like the same thing or that they're all good at the same thing, that everyone has their individual callings in life, their individual talents or gifts and so forth. So here they had two sons, one's a farmer and one's a shepherd.
And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him.
Some time passes. Don't know how much time, all right? We'll assume that they're at the very least adults, all right? So it could be 20 years, could be 30 years, could it be longer, right? Don't know. All right, some time has passed, and on this particular day, it says Cain brought an offering to God from what he had grown, and it says Abel brought an offering from one of his sheep. And as you see, it says that the Lord accepted one and not the other. We've kind of always understood that Cain perhaps didn't give his best, all right? It just says he gave of the fruit of the ground, all right? So you could take it, that could be anything, right? That could be the rotten fruit, it could be what was left over, it could be whatever, right? Where it says Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock, in other words, of the best. So that's always been our understanding, is that Abel gave of the best, and Cain just gave maybe some not of the best. So therefore, otherwise, why would God play favorites, all right? So I mean, clearly there was some reason why he said, okay, I'm not accepting that offer or that offering, but I am this one. All right. So once that had happened, all right, you can see this as Cain was very wroth or angry, all right, and then God says, hey, what's up with that, all right? Why are you angry? If you do good, then it works out. If you don't do good, then it doesn't. So he says, really, you have no reason to be angry because it's your own fault, basically. You're not really doing what you should be doing here. And I know we can broaden this out into a more general discussion of doing right or sinning or whatever, right? Because now he brings sin into the picture. God does in verse 7. It says, "If thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door," right? And I would take this that when you're angry is when you're more likely to do something wrong. Okay. In fact, there's another scripture that says, "Be angry and sin not." Okay, you have to be careful when you're angry. When you're angry, you're not going to hold back. So then suddenly more things go than would normally be the case when you're in your right mind. That's why he's saying, be careful when you're angry. Sin lies at the door. All right, and it says, "Unto thee shall be his desire." In other words, sin can overtake you, can kind of take over your way of thinking, and suddenly you could do anything. Right? In fact, as we know the story, we know he is going to, in fact, do anything, right? So, if you let your anger run away with you, then bad things are going to happen. Whereas instead, at the end of the verse, it says, "Thou shalt rule over him," him being sin, right? That really you should try to keep your mind and your life, or your mind in check, right? So that you rule over the sin. Don't let him rule over you. Is really what he's saying. Okay, that be careful. Don't let your anger overtake you to where you're going to do things that you really shouldn't do.
And Cain talked with Abel his brother. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?
A famous scene, of course, all right? It says that it says Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and they were in the field, and Cain kills his brother, right? Now, so you would assume they're out by themselves. You would assume that Cain figured, okay, nobody's here, so nobody's going to know what's happening. And of course, again, I don't know how he's going to explain away that his brother kind of disappeared, right? But so he kills his brother, and then but of course we know there in essence was a witness, which was God, right? And so God saw, of course, what happened, and so just like in the previous chapter where he came and asked Adam, where are you, right? And Adam was hiding, but so now it's almost a similar thing here, right? He asks Cain to say, where's Abel, your brother? I haven't seen him today, all right? And of course, he knew full well what had happened, and so Cain gives the famous response. He said, I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? Right? Am I responsible for him? Am I supposed to keep track of him? All right, why are you asking me? Look from yourself. All right, and so like I said, that's the famous response, am I my brother's keeper? And I've heard people teach or preach that just in general, that even from a spiritual perspective, that we should be our brother's keeper, right? In other words, there's nothing wrong with trying to look after each other and be there for each other, and not that we're in it for ourselves. So I mean, but here in this case, it was just the two brothers, so you would have thought that would have been some feeling of responsibility, not even to say, why is he missing? Where is he? Gee, I'm worried. All right, well, I don't know. I'm not responsible for him. Find him yourself. Perhaps him giving a different answer. I mean, it could have been he could have shown some remorse over what happened. It's like, oh God, I can't believe I did this, or I don't know what overcame me, or whatever. I'm so sorry. Right, but instead it was more just let's just sweep under the rug, and God won't notice, right, that Abel's missing. Okay, so yeah, I mean, maybe he was looking for what he was going to say, and so like I said, he could have been remorseful, repentant, and at least that would have been a step in the right direction. But it wasn't. And if anything was arrogance, who cares? I don't know. I'm not responsible for him. Okay.
And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth.
Of course, God knew what had happened, so that's why, in spite of the response from Cain, he says, "What have you done here? Your brother's blood cries unto me from the ground." All right, so I always pictured that he buried him somewhere, so that's why there's nothing that says one way or the other, but that's how I always pictured him when it said his blood cries to me from the ground, that he had buried him somewhere. But regardless, even if he just hit the body, I'm sure there was blood on the ground, so he says here, his blood cries to me from the ground. So I know what happened, and so quickly he goes on to what the punishment's going to be, all right? Especially since there was no remorse or repentance here. So, he says, well, now there's a penalty attached to this particular action, right? And so in 11 it says, you're cursed from the earth, which has opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. So when you till the ground, it shall not yield unto thee her strength, all right? And the fugitive and the vagabond are going to be. Now we remember that Cain was the farmer, so I mean his only way of making money or providing for himself was to grow things. So basically God's saying, guess what? When you try to grow stuff, nothing's going to grow. All right, so he basically turned off his only means of supporting himself, so that he was going to have to now figure out some other way to live, because whatever you do with the ground, it's not going to work. Right? So when you try to grow something, nothing's going to grow, and so as a result, you're going to have to kind of just be like a vagabond, is like a wanderer. You're going to bounce around from one area to another, probably just almost like a beggar looking for a little work here or there or whatever, and a fugitive, because guess what? When the people find out what you've done, right? This is now the first murder, and, the first thing like this. And in fact, it was probably the first person who had died. So because people had never died before, so this was the first death, the first murder. So yeah, this was a very monumental thing, right, that had happened.
And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him.
Right, so upon hearing the punishment, you see Cain's reaction is, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Right, that's too much that you're putting on me. Right, and so look, I mean, bad enough that you've turned off the ground here, so I can't grow anything. But now I'm going to have to be a fugitive. Anybody who runs into me is going to want to kill me, right? Because of what I've done. So they're going to not be happy with me. They're going to try to kill me. And so this is what he's saying to God. He says, you're basically ending my life here. Right? Not that it seemed to matter the end of somebody else's life, but this is too much for me to bear. So you see God's response in 15. It says, all right, here's the deal. All right, we'll show a little mercy here. Right? If anybody tries to kill you, or if anybody kills you, it says vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. Right? Whatever that would mean. So in other words, God's going to set it up so no one's going to kill him. And in fact, as he says, he puts some kind of a mark on him. Now, it doesn't say what the mark is, right? But some kind of a mark that would, in essence, show other people that this is not somebody to be killed, right? That God has put a mark on him. So that was supposed to protect his life so that nobody else would kill him. And you hear sometimes about the mark of Cain, right? And a lot of people think that was a negative thing, all right? That in essence, that there was the mark of Cain. In other words, he was marked as a murderer, or he was branded as a murderer, right? But you see, in fact, it's the opposite. It was God's mercy in this case, that the mark was to protect him from being killed by somebody else. That was the purpose of the mark. So he was actually being merciful to him in spite of what he had done. All right, now fine, we'll fix it so nobody's going to kill you. All right, now you can live a full life, but you're still going to have to provide for yourself in some way other than growing things, because that's been turned off. Of course, as we're reading the story, right, we started with Adam and Eve, and now we have Cain and Abel, and now Abel is gone. Now Cain's saying, well, wherever I go, people are going to want to kill me, right? And I need protection from all these people who are going to kill me. So where do all these people come from? All right, well, as happens in other times in the Bible, it doesn't detail every single thing, all right? But later on, we find out that Adam and Eve had, quote, sons and daughters, right? So they had a larger family, all right? And remember, I said that we don't know how much time passed to this point, okay? And it would be our understanding, just based on logic, that this was before there was any prevention from, let's say, marrying your sister, for example, all right? So, if they were the first parents, then they were going to populate the earth, then at least the first ones had to be brothers and sisters marrying each other, right? That was the first families. So, in fact, we're going to see in a minute, Cain had a wife, right? Well, his wife had to be one of his sisters, right? Because it's the only thing that would make any sense. So if time had passed and there were other brothers and sisters, they would have started to populate areas, and so that would be the only explanation, right? Really, it was more family members who were around. Which, if you figure it that way, it makes even more sense that someone would say, you killed Abel, all right? You killed a member of the family, so of course they're going to want to jump him, all right? All the more so that they're really going to be upset and angry with him. So I'm sure he was persona non grata at that point with anybody, because it was all relatives. It was all, either brothers and sisters or nieces, nephews, whatever, right? It was the whole big family. So yeah, that's the only possible explanation, because otherwise, where did these people magically come from that suddenly are going to kill Cain, unless God was creating more people and not telling us, right? Which there's no record of that. So as far as we can tell, like I said, Adam and Eve had a larger family than what's detailed here. As we've said other times, the names of the girls never get mentioned, all right? So it's just the men who were mentioned. So there were daughters, and so we assumed there was, that they had children and so forth. We don't know how much time had passed at this point, so it had to be other family members that we're talking about.
And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech.
So the punishment's been given, all right, and so it says Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, all right, and it says dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden, all right. So notice that Cain has now basically departed from the scene, all right. It says he's gone out from the presence of the Lord, and you would assume from the presence of pretty much all the family members too, all right. So he was going to be an outcast at this point, all right. Yeah, who would want him around? You killed Abel, all right. So he was more or less an outcast, but he did, I guess, take at least one of the sisters or nieces or somebody to be his wife, and so they were able to have their own child. As you see, it says Cain knew his wife, and then she conceived and bare Enoch. Right? It says he built a city and called the name of the city after his son Enoch. So they were starting their own family at this point, right? But it's assumed that it was separate from everybody else because he was a fugitive, and people would have wanted to kill him. Right? Maybe if they saw the mark, they wouldn't have, but they certainly would have wanted to. Right? And then it just carries it down to the next generation. It says Enoch had a son, and he had a son, and he had a son. Okay, down to somebody named Lamech, right, who we're going to pick up with in the next verse. But when I had originally read this, years ago, I asked the same question here that we did in the last verses, right? When it says Cain knew his wife, so well, who was his wife, right? How did he find a wife? But yeah, it had to be a sister or even a niece, right? Again, if time had passed and then maybe he hadn't married, well, now somebody else had a grown girl, and so it could have been a niece as well. But yeah, it was some family member that was his wife, and then they went off and started their own family and so forth.
And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. And Adah bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, and the city of Tubal-Cain was Naamah.
See, remember that this is from the line of Cain, okay? So, so again, he was the one who was the murderer, unrepentant, went off by himself, and now started his own family. And as we have read in 18, a couple generations have now passed. Right now, it's down to somebody named Lamech, right? And so you can see the effect of. Remember, they said that Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. Right, so he was no longer in God's presence, therefore not affected by God or influenced by God. And so now you see what happens, right? That it starts to already move away from what we would consider God's precepts, okay? Now, starting right in 19, it says Lamech took unto him 2 wives, all right? So now he's the first one that we know of that was multiple wives, okay? Up until then it was 1 wife, right? It was Adam and Eve. It was, even Cain had 1 wife, right? Now this guy has 2 wives. So, and those are named, all right? And now they have some children, all right? And the children, I mean, it appears are relatively normal, but again, notice there's nothing about God in here, right? It says the one, what does it say? The one dwells in tents and raises cattle. The other one is like into music, the harp and the organ. The other one's into brass and iron and so forth. All right, so again, nothing wrong with these things. So they were raising skilled family members, all right, but skilled in the things of your hands of the earth, but nothing about any spiritual value, right? Because Cain had left the presence of God. So you can see, even as time has passed, because think of raising a family and not teaching them about God, today, and now that family teaches their children, and they teach their children, well, after 3-4 generations, who's God, right? They're not going to even know who God is. And so that's what's happening right here already, right? They were separate from God, separate from the other people, and so they were going on a different path that had nothing to do with God.
And Lamech said unto his wives Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold.
On top of the having the two wives, all right, so this guy Lamech, all right, apparently he killed somebody too, all right, and it sounds like he's proud of it, all right, he's proud of it. He says, hey, look, come here, my two wives, let me tell you what I did today. Hey, I went out and killed a guy, and he was even younger than me, and yet I was still able to kill him, all right, and says, I've slain a man to my wounding, young man to my hurt, and if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, anybody who tries to come after me, it's going to be 77-fold, all right? In other words, no one's gonna kill me, all right? So I mean, I can stand up myself, protect myself. So yeah, I mean, Cain, they thought that was good, sevenfold. Hey, you come after me, 77-fold, you're gonna get paid back for it. So like I said, or someone who's quite evil, all right? An evil man by this point, all right? And he's has the two wives. He's proud of the fact that he killed somebody. He's ready to kill anybody else who's going to come after him, right? Maybe he was one of the first mobsters. I don't know, all right? But so this is what came from the line of Cain, right? Is that they're raising people who have some skill in the world, but nothing as far as any knowledge or exposure to God.
And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord.
See, from 16 to 24, we had read about the line of Cain, all right, and all the way down to Lamech, all right. So now in 25, we're going back to the other people, all right, the ones who were still living in the presence of the Lord, all right. And it says that Adam got together with his wife again, all right, and had another son, all right. This one is named Seth. And so you see her statement. It says, for God, says she, has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. Right. So in other words, that I have nobody, we have nobody to reproduce our family because Abel is dead and Cain has gone away. Right. So remembering that really they lost both sons at that time. Right. One died and one was gone. So they had no sons left. They probably had daughters, but no sons. So Seth became the replacement, if you will, for Abel in particular. Now she said, okay, now we can have somebody to continue our seed. And in fact, in the genealogy that's listed, see, Seth is actually listed as under Adam, right? So that was their son that the genealogy would pass through, right? Because, like I said, Abel was dead and Cain was gone. So Seth became the son that came under Adam in the genealogy. Right, and so as it continues in 26, it says he bore a son named Enos. Right, and now my understanding would be that at this point, because this was the godly branch, or those who were going to try to know the Lord, that's why it says men began to call upon the name of the Lord at this point. So you would assume that they've been taught about God, and that they understand we need to have some kind of relationship with God. I mean, Adam and Eve had been thrown out of the Garden of Eden, but certainly they knew who God was, so they would have taught Seth, this is who God is, and we need to know him, we need to try to do what's right, and that would be passed on to his son as well. All right, so that's why by the time Enos would have been born, there would have been something of a family, so now you have a group that can call upon the name of the Lord. So perhaps they were having worship services or singing hymns or whatever, right, having prayer together. They began to call upon the name of the Lord then. So this was going to be those who were going to be raised in a more godly manner, the ones that stayed with Adam and Eve, as opposed to the ones that went with Cain.